Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today as well to the podcast Secrets of Designing Tomorrow. Today, our special guest is Jodi Wellman. She is a leading authority on living lives worth living. As a speaker and facilitator, she helps her clients live squander-free lives. Jodi holds a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, where she is also an assistant instructor. As a certified coach with 25 years of corporate leadership experience, she helps executives, teams, and high performance work well and live even better. Welcome, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here chatting with you.
I am also excited and honored to have you here because I know that this topic that we are going to discuss about today makes many people feel uncomfortable. So let's hear a bit more about it and tell us more about your story, first of all, and how you start on this path of helping other people with this specific topic.
Okay, happy to. And I like your point right out of the gates about how sometimes our mortality can poke us in the ribs and we don't want to talk about it. But I hope by the end of our conversation today, it's very clear that by talking about it, it can actually be a really good thing. At least research shows this, and my experience shows this. And so thank you for asking a little bit about my story and background. And I am happy to share a little bit around probably a couple different things. You know, I found myself at one point in my career trapped, and the trap I realized was self-imposed. You know, I felt very stuck in a career that was making me feel kind of itchy, and I wanted something different. And I just knew that there was something better out there for me, but I'll be honest, I was really scared. I didn't know how to look for something new. I didn't even know what I wanted. And I liked being good at what I was doing. I liked my title. I liked the money. Again, those are the trappings of success, right? And yet, especially in retrospect, when I look back on it, I recognize for that sort of 3-year period, I recognize how in so many ways, I was not living life fully. I was not living alive, right? I was living kind of in a minimal way, just going through the motions, doing fine, but fine is in air quotes, right? Like that's not good enough. And I, in and around that time, my mom passed away and she was in her late 50s. And so certainly premature. And one of the things that struck me when she did pass away was that she died with a lot of regrets, a lot of dreams that were left unfulfilled. And it woke me up. You know, it made me realize that, wait a sec, like life is short. Do I want to keep feeling stuck for 3 more years in this career that is fine, but definitely not lighting up my life? You know, do I want to get to my end, my deathbed, and feel like I was a chicken and I didn't want to leave my job because I was too scared to shake things up? Woo. So that woke me up and helped me realize life is for the taking. Right? Like it's up to us to design it like you do and to make what we want of our tomorrows. And so, when I realized, of course, my mom wasn't planning on dying at her age. And so I could technically die tomorrow. I want to live in such a way that I will be proud at the end of how I made tough choices, but exciting ones, and that I lived fully. So that really was part of the impetus for me to start 4,000 Mondays.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Jodi. I can fully relate to what you are saying. I am totally in the same situation and I can fully understand what you are saying. And I know the scary thoughts and then leaving and coming back and leaving and thinking, is this the right thing or not? And I can fully understand that. And I find it very brave that you made the step and you said, okay, no more. This is it. I want to live my life. Can I ask you, what does it mean for you right now to live your life? How does it look like?
Oh, what a good question. I always go back to this framework that I have come up with. And I look at that through the lens of the way we see life, often on a timeline. I don't know about you, but there's this idea of I want to live as long as I can, and that would be good to live long, but I don't want to live long if I'm not feeling like I'm living both wide and deep. And so that's the framework, as I say, how can we not just live longer, or even if we don't live very long, how do we have more kind of quality, not just quantity of years? So I look at life like widening our time by stuffing our day-to-day experience with vitality. And that's usually through thinking of it like adding more pleasure, more fun, more experience, more hobbies, more joy, more of the contentment, the fun stuff that lights us up, and the pizza that we like to eat, and the fun times, and all the hedonic stuff. So I look at it like, all right, am I living wide? Or some days I look at it and I'm like, I'm living kind of narrow. So I think of that as the first component. And then the other component is, am I living my life in a deep way? And the depth I associate with meaning. And that has to do with more of the juicy stuff, like, is what I'm doing, do I feel like I'm adding anything to the world? Does what I'm doing have any kind of purpose or meaning? Am I connected to other people? Am I giving? Am I helping? Am I feeling like there's richness? So the width is all the fun and the margaritas, and the depth is all the, have I done random acts of kindness that help other people in this universe? And so for me, I'm always looking at it in terms of those two axes. And then there are quadrants. And so to be honest, like I'm constantly evaluating my existence with, where does it feel like something might be missing? Because sometimes we take the good stuff for granted, and then we sometimes lose track when maybe we're off track. And sometimes I'll feel that little, wait a minute, things aren't as fun as they used to be, or wait a minute, things feel kind of empty. And it's a matter of consciously pausing and saying, oh, well, where is it? Is it on the width, or is it the depth, or both? Sometimes it's both. And maybe what can I do to make that one subtle adjustment to feel like I'm living more lively? And so that's the way that I look at it. That's the way I encourage people to look at their own lives.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, but I think that's also difficult sometimes to reassess, or maybe we are on automatic pilots. And I know that especially if we are in careers, in a job, then we are in our tasks. We don't even realize what we are feeling and how we are feeling and how we are living every single day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because then here's the good news, is that listening to podcasts like yours does do a little bit of a wait a minute. Or, the work that I do with clients, that's where we have to have that intentionality to stop and assess, or at least a routine. Like I work with people where they'll have a plan where the last Friday of every month, they stop and do a personal retreat for, even if it's like an hour at the coffee shop, or half of a day to sit somewhere beautiful that's inspiring, or just quiet. And it could be a closet, and stop and really do an assessment of, where are things feeling dead and where are things feeling alive? Because we'll just keep going, like you said, on autopilot, day after day, month after month, and maybe not notice.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned, Jodi, at the beginning of your introduction, the 4,000 Mondays.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes. So here's the morbid truth of it all. We roughly get 4,000 weeks to live. And so I get a little fanatical about quantifying it. Like, let's size the prize here. And so I know, for example, as of this week, I have 1,903 Mondays left. And I hope I get more, but I might get less. And so I love the idea of getting everybody to calculate it, because there's something that transitions in us when we quantify how scarce our time is. Yes, it does the thing, like you said, it makes us uncomfortable, but it also does something where it makes us go, whoa, I don't have a whole ton of time left, or maybe not. And so how do I want to spend that time? Like, it makes us crystal clear on how special and precious the remaining time is. So that's the 4,000 Mondays idea.
Wow. Oh my God. I never heard anything like this. This is amazing. This is exceptional, Jodi. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I encourage everyone to go to your programs, because I absolutely believe that everyone needs to be aware of this, to really reassess the time that we are having, because I believe that we are living like if we are immortals, which is not the case.
Oh, that's such a good point. Because even though we know, like we're rational, we get it, we understand, there's no spoiler alert that we're going to all die. But we do this thing, very elaborate denial, or we push it off to the side and we might acknowledge it and say, yeah, but it's not for a long ways away. True. And yet, like I look at me and I look back to the 3 years in particular that I was stuck and just unfulfilled and even just like some days miserable at work. Our lives could be just a succession of those 3-year chunks leading up to the end, whether you think that it's a long, far away ending or not. And even if it is perceived as far away, do you want to be spending your time in ways that feels less than totally alive? Or do we want to squander our time? And of course we don't want to squander it. But so I'm so glad you find the countdown inspiring and not weird, because they would get very awkward right now if you said, let's end this podcast conversation. You found it too weird.
No, absolutely not. That's amazing that I know that I am amongst those that you mentioned that I just push it down the road. I don't want to think about it because I don't want to bring anything negative in my life. But I know that sometimes it helps, because I have also this tendency sometimes to just feel like, okay, I still have time. I will do it tomorrow, or I don't know, I will do that in 1 year. But it's not like that. You don't know. You don't know.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that you feel that way too, where we just sort of ignore it because you don't want to bring in the negative. And, I have a quandary, right? So I studied positive psychology, and there's this notion that my topic of mortality that's called the dark side. And yet I encourage us that the way that we can see it, and maybe it's a reframe, is less about the fact that we're not going to imagine in vivid detail the pain at the end and never seeing our cat again and losing our loved ones. Like, we're not toiling in the idea of grief and misery. It's more the idea of acceptance that this is something that we all understand. And so having less of a sense, even just of attachment to life. It's not even so much about accepting the end. It's more just like tapping into that knowledge and pretty quickly, admittedly, flipping it into the seize the day. And so this is where I encourage us to say, are there things in our lives right now that we are doing or most likely not doing that we would regret? That we would say, if we did find ourselves on our deathbeds, would we say, oh man, like I really wanted to try and go back to school and I never did, or I really wanted to, get out there and change my career, but I never did. Or I wanted to pick up that hobby and I never tried to learn the piano, but I was always curious about it. And so these are just small, well, some of them are small examples. Some of them are not small. I know it is not small to change your career or to necessarily go back to school, but these are all things that we can make happen that might feel scary. And they also might make us feel a heck of a lot more alive in the time we're lucky enough to have left.
Yeah. I agree with you. Actually, I don't see it as something negative the way you explain it, but more like something positive. It's actually about, as you mentioned, seizing the day, seizing right now, the present, being in the present and living it fully. So instead of thinking, as you said, about the death moment, we are more focused on the now without ignoring it, because then in the end, this is what it is about. Thank you so much. This is really eye-opening. I never had this in my podcast. I love it.
Oh, I'm so glad to be chatting about this with you. I get giddy about it.
Can you tell us a bit more whether you think that people can make that change? Because I know that even if we maybe think, okay, I don't want to regret not writing that book, not going on a podcast, not being on stage, not doing that thing, piano or whatever it is. But still, sometimes we feel like we don't have a choice. We have responsibilities. We have, I don't know, a mortgage that we have to pay. So we cannot choose. We cannot make the decisions the way we want to. What would you advise people to do in these situations?
Yeah. I can really relate to the fear. And so let's just all stop and acknowledge it's a really crappy time sometimes being a human, because we are born with natural defense mechanisms that want to keep us safe. But unfortunately, it also keeps us from believing that we can actually pursue anything that might give us a shot at more joy. So I do very well know that's what kept me stuck in my career. And I have a lot of things that currently I want to do that I am so aware that fear is holding me back. And so I think number one is to acknowledge we're all sort of in this together. So we're not alone in this feeling of feeling trapped. I would then encourage us to stop and wake up to the stories that we are telling ourselves. Because usually we have a convenient story as to why the change we want to make is either not responsible or feasible or just downright possible or affordable or all the other words that end in BLE. I don't know. There are a lot of them. And because to your point about how I have a mortgage, well, maybe the idea about changing a career, for example, or is not necessarily like there's a way to do it where it doesn't need to be that you all of a sudden go in guns a-blazing, quit your job, burn all your bridges, and all of a sudden have no job tomorrow and you've got 4 kids at home. That's one extreme, but that's what we do is we think in extremes. It's all or nothing. It's either I'm leaving my job today and I have no income, or it's the other extreme of I just have to stay forever and be stuck, miserable until the day I die. So usually it's about mapping out a plan that's reasonable. That's just simply one step at a time. It's that one step might be starting to talk to a career coach, or one step might be, investigating other jobs that do light you up while giving yourself permission to not feel fear when you look at the job description and think, oh, they would never take me. So it's usually about breaking it out into chunks, paying attention to that story that's in your head. Or if you say a lot of people have a desire to move, this idea about, I'll have to give you an example. My husband and I in Chicago, freezing our butts off for 15 years, and in Toronto before that for our lives. We said, I want to go somewhere warm. And the plan was, let's move somewhere warm. And is that easy? Heck no. Is it really daunting? Does it require a lot of logistics? Absolutely. And yet, am I sitting right now in California because we made a move? Yes, because it is completely possible that if you want something and you are very certain that it's worth the risk to try for a little bit more joy, then it's going to require some discomfort. And it's going to require jumping and trying and hoping, and also the trust and belief that if it doesn't work, you can always fix it. Like, think about, we often catastrophize, don't we? We think, if I make the career change, I might get into the other job and I might hate it. Or I might move to California and it might be too sweaty. Or I might start school and I might fail. Or I might start writing the book and have writer's block. Well, you know what? At the end, most people, this is true through research. Back to the idea of most people regretting the path they didn't take rather than the path they did take that didn't work. The pain and angst of wondering about what could have been, what should have been, is usually a lot greater than trying it and saying, yeah, we moved to California and it was a bust. But then we laughed about it later when we moved over to Idaho or when we moved to Paris, right? So usually the pride and kind of confidence that comes from knowing that we took a shot at it. There's this quote that I love around how we sometimes approach life, the idea about playing to win versus playing not to lose. And most of us would rather play to win and sometimes lose, sometimes miserably and hilariously, but we tried, rather than just always playing it safe and not changing the career and not asking the guy out and not trying to play the piano because we didn't want to not feel successful. That's a life that feels narrow, and that's usually when we end up in the dead zone.
Yes. I absolutely agree with you. And I hear many people saying that I don't want to hope because what if it doesn't become true? Then I will be disappointed.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people who are thinking like that?
Oh, first, I would just want to give them a big hug, a very safe hug in, COVID times, and say, again, I relate. And also, I'm picturing this postcard I have somewhere about a roller coaster. And it says that if you want the highs, you have to experience the lows. And so there is this notion in life around, again, back to playing it safe. We can construct our lives so that they are very small, and we put barriers and guards up around us so that we don't tell anyone we love them because we don't want to hear that they didn't love us back. Or I know somebody who had a dog die very early on in his childhood, and he'll never buy, never get, never adopt a pet again because he doesn't want the anguish of losing a pet again. And yet, and some people might be like, rock on, that's the way I want to live. But some people might think, oh, but no, you're missing out on years and years and years of the joy and love that a dog could bring you. So we can construct our lives to prevent the lows. But when we do that, we just have to consciously acknowledge you're also preventing highs. And riding the roller coaster of life, the experience of being alive, if you want to feel astonishingly alive, it's just going to come, unfortunately, with some days and some times where it's not what you planned or not what you wanted. But acknowledging, just like death, it's an end that none of us would really desire. And yet it's just part of the human reality. And so I would say that not hoping so that you don't feel the pain of rejection, it's just, you know what if it meant dialing it up 15%, just hoping 15%. You don't have to hope 150%, but what if it just meant a little bit more? What could that do for you?
I love that. I am on the extreme. I believe really, like when I believe in something, I go full force, like 1000%, and then I fall.
Well, and that's a neat path too. Like that's really, and a lot of people probably look at you and think, wow, that's inspiring, right? And because to be honest, I mean, there's lots of research and studies that show the power of optimism and hope typically leads to better outcomes, it's like more at bats. I'm not a sports person, but this sports analogy always seems to work in my mind. Like if you got to get up there and you got to try and hope and have a lot of hopes and try big, try lots, the whole quote, like, you know, aim for the moon. And if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Like I'd be happy living amongst the stars. I don't have to get to the moon. And so same thing, like have the, like hope big and wide, and some of those hopes will land. And is that a life at the end? If we die at 83, where you think about how, man, I lived a lot of my time in the stars, or I had a lot of my hopes come true. 3 out of 10 of them didn't, but 7 out of 10 of them did. And that gave me an amazing life versus living a life where you only hope for 4 things. And if only 2 of them come true, then you've only ever had 2 hopes and dreams come true your entire life. Like it's kind of a numbers game. Back to quantifying our Mondays. I want to have more hopes, more at-bats, more shots at the moon, because then at least some of them are going to work. And then I'm going to be on my deathbed and feel like I had some wins.
I love that you are talking about wins, because actually just today I was reflecting on kind of my journey and putting together a media kit. And somehow, I don't know why, for the last months, I had this impression that what I am doing is not really working. And then I started to really put everything together in one place, right? Because in the media kit, you have to be very like brief and at the same time put a lot, and client testimonials and results and numbers and figures and certificates. Now, like, oh my God, look at everything I achieved. And it's impressive. And I know that I myself, I don't do it enough. And what would you advise people to do to actually celebrate those wins? How can we celebrate and acknowledge what we are doing and the way we are living?
Oh, your example is the best thing I've heard in a long time about how you had to put that together. And then when you do it, you get this confidence boost, right? Like, I'm kind of a badass. And so you're hitting on this whole thing called the progress principle, right? Where as humans, you know, we are wired towards having a negativity bias. So the things that are negative and nasty are just unfortunately things that we're more interested in paying attention to, and they're stickier, and we hold on to that information longer. And so, yeah, we're going to dwell, quite frankly, on the things we didn't do. Like how you said, I kind of got it in my head that things weren't working. And sometimes those are important signals, sure. But we have to consciously override the negativity bias, consciously override it. and plan to stop and say, how can I get myself recentered on some of my successes? And so I recommend for clients having along the lines of this progress principle that researchers show that people, when they analyze their best day, at least at work, it's when they've made any progress towards a goal. And so you have to have milestones. And what most of us do is we say, I want to achieve XYZ out there in the end, but it may be years away. And it's exhausting. And it's so demotivating when we haven't reached the goal yet. You're like, yeah, but you're only 1/104th of the way there, right? But so are you going to build in little tiny small wins along the way that you can celebrate? So for example, I have a client who did decide to go back to school, and she has a family and she's really tired, but she loves every time she finishes a course. She and her kids and her husband have this really fun celebration, and they pop open the champagne, and her kids have sparkly beverages that don't have alcohol. And they have this whole thing, and her kids make Bristol boards and say, congratulations, you're done course number 7. And she celebrates and makes it amazing. I work with clients where they have to systematically outline, what are your highlights? What are things you're proud of? And it could be anything. It could be, yeah, it's easy if it's an award at work, but what about, I'm really proud that I, was able to mediate, a really tough relationship between my colleagues or my friends, or I'm really proud that I took this step and started piano lessons. So it's like making a list of the stuff we do well. I'll give you one more example. There's a woman I'm working with now, this super cool, successful woman who she is really big in her to-do list, and she will create the list every day and every week of the things she wants to accomplish. And she's so upset because she said, I didn't get to all the things on my list this week. And these are big things, and some of them are small, but I didn't get to it. But when we analyzed the other stuff she did in her day in that week, she was doing really important things that was like leadership related, that you don't usually put a box down for, did I lead my team in this way? Did I mentor this new employee? But she was doing these things. And I said, you need to start a list. And she's an Excel junkie. So she started a tab in Excel for stuff I did this week that wasn't on my list, but that I'm pretty darn proud of. And that way, then at the end of the week, you get to go back and say, yeah, I did chip in at the last minute and do a really creative, icebreaker for that meeting. Or I did bake an amazing casserole for dinner this week that we're totally going to make again and again. Like making notes of the things that you kind of want to high five yourself about that didn't make your to-do list. So you didn't get that little instant gratification, but track the things that went well and give yourself pats on the back.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Jodi. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. I absolutely love learning from you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I would like to close today our interview by asking you, who are you serving and how can people contact you if they wish to work with you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. I love serving groups to do presentations and workshops, and individuals who are just looking to live life a little wider and deeper. And I can be found at 4000mondays.com. I've got lots of resources there, blogs and resources. And of course, there's a countdown timer that'll help you calculate your Mondays. But yeah, we'd just love to help anybody feel more alive at 4000mondays.com.
Thank you so much once again, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining me and for inspiring us to live the best selves today, not tomorrow, not in 1,000 years, but today. Thank you so much.
Well said. It's been a total pleasure.
Thank you.